Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
The Stock Movers Podcast. This is your roundup of companies making news on Wall Street and beyond, harnessing the power of Bloomberg data.
Well, let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. In Europe, we're joined by Bloomberg's equities reporter, Joe Easton. Joe, good morning. Kingfisher, we'll start with them, the owner of the DIY retailer B&Q.
Yeah, so Kingfisher having a really bad day. It's down 12% at the moment in London. This after a trading update. Now, interestingly, the weakest market for them seems to be France. The people in France not doing enough DIY, according to the owner of B&Q. So the new guidance from them implies a downgrade to their earnings estimates of around 6% for the full year, according to analysts. And this stock actually had a really poor run post-pandemic because we were all stuck at home with not much better to do. So we all did all that DIY, and then that kind of faded and that rally petered out, and this does look like to be a continuation of that. But now the focus not on the UK but on France, and therefore that does seem to be the downgrade in terms of their earnings. And that stock, as I say, down 12%, the worst performer across the entire stock 600 this morning.
I always enjoy that the names of the French retail brands for Kingfisher as well. Castorama, a classic one of those as well. It makes it sound much more fun.
Classy, doesn't it?
It just sounds a bit more fun, honestly. Anyway, let's turn to Shell next, the oil giant looking to pump up its profit.
Pump up, yes. Try to think where we can go with that. So maybe drill down into this one with nice. Shell. So, thank you. So Shell has their big trading update in terms of their capital markets day today that they're holding in New York. So this has been a really big focus. Everyone's been talking about this. And Shell today saying that they're going to boost investor returns, potentially return around half of their free cash to shareholders in the medium term. The interesting thing here is that it's all driven by their liquefied natural gas business, and that's really where they focus. So a lot of the other firms have focused on renewables. Shell has focused more on gas, and actually that's where it continues to see the higher returns, and therefore they're actually able to give more of that cash to shareholders. So the stock is up around 2% at the moment. There's also speculation whether they will spin off one of their chemicals businesses. So really looks like a pretty steady update and continuing the outperformance that we've seen for that stock versus the old rival BP, which has lagged a bit. So Shell up 2% at the moment in London.
Yeah, and of course that's quite a heavy weight on the stock index here. It's the second biggest weighted firm on the FTSE 100 as well, so it tends to lift the whole index when Shell's having a good day. So the FTSE 100 up by 0.5% this morning. Turning next to some underwhelming car sales figures in Europe. This is as Barclays has been looking at the region's Truckmakers.
Yeah, so new car registration in Europe down around 3% in February from a year earlier. So it's another weak report from the Auto Association. The overall drop driven by a 24% slump in gasoline-powered vehicles, according to the Autos Association. That's European Automakers Manufacturers Association. But as you mentioned, there's also this really interesting note from Barclays, and they are downgrading their recommendations on the makers of European trucks. So these are Volvo, Daimler Truck and also Traton, cutting their ratings, no longer recommend buying these. This is more tied to the regulations in the US on emissions. So the US is set to roll back some of the clean emissions regulations it had on trucks, meaning that companies that need trucks, so lorry companies and also construction companies, they won't need to upgrade their vehicles, and therefore their sales are likely to decline, according to Barclays. So those ones really underperforming in the market. All those stocks down around 2 to 3% this morning as Barclays downgrades, and also the added news of these weak car sales once again weighing on the sector.
The Stock Movers Podcast from Bloomberg Radio. Check back with us throughout the day for the latest roundup of companies making news on Wall Street. And for the latest market-moving headlines, listen to Bloomberg Radio live. Catch us on YouTube, Bloomberg.com, and on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app.